What is up? Welcome to Etsy Jam, episode 80. When people exercise, it's usually to improve their physical strength, but today we're going to talk about some interesting ways to improve your mental strength. It can have a huge impact on your attitude, habits, and performance. If that alone isn't enough to pique your interest, the points we are about to cover were originally organized by a former FBI agent. She says these 3 mental toughness tools can produce the right attitude to move everyone toward success. What is up? Welcome to Etsy Jam. I am Gordon from Marmalead.
And I am Richie from Marmalead. And if you don't yet know what Marmalead is, Marmalead gets your products found with real shopper keywords, effectively taking the guesswork out of getting found on Etsy. If you want to learn more about Marmalead, check us out at marmalead.com. And that is MARMALEAD.com.
And you don't have to take our word for it. Check out this seller spotlight from our friend Michelle over at 4-Letter Word Cards.
My shop name is 4-Letter Word Cards, and I essentially sell greeting cards with lots of glitter and curse words, as well as gifts like coffee mugs, enamel pins, tote bags, some awesome inspirational curse word pencils, and I just got into selling and designing stickers. The reason why I got into the business that I did, number one, is because I enjoy it, and number two, there are a lot of underrepresented communities within businesses of what they offer. So for me, it's really important to have representation for LGBT communities, as well as people who might be a little more kinky or just want to have fun in their relationship. So it's more flirty stuff with innuendos, but not really saying too dirty of words. Right now, I would have to say my pencils have been really popular. I just introduced them and I share them on social media and they sort of went a little crazy. And then also enamel pins are pretty popular. Well, I think it takes a bit of the guesswork out of the keywords and what to put in your title and your tags and all of that. Richie and Gordon, the business owners of Marmalead, they're pretty fantastic. They have a huge group on Facebook and everyone's pretty supportive. I ended up talking to Richie when Marmalead first came into being. It's been amazing to see it sort of develop. They definitely take feedback from users and try to apply that into Marmalead. I think it's awesome when you have a team that's so committed to providing such high quality content. I don't know any other app for Etsy that has been so at the forefront of creating content for creators that help them push and develop as far as they want to go. I think for me, the aha moment is that once you think you have it figured out, you're probably going to have to learn more. One of the great things about Marmalead is it gives you relevant information. Even though Etsy's changed, it pulls the information from Etsy. So you always have relevant information when it comes to your keywords and tags and all of that. Number one is to remember to always be true to who you are and to do something that you love and to make sure that you soak all of your essence into your shop, because I think that's when you're going to be most successful, is when it's who you are. Number two is to always develop and always change with your website. If you remain stagnant and you only ever provide one particular style of something or one particular thing, people are going to get bored with it. So you always want to make sure to keep pushing yourself, because when you're growing, your business is growing too.
All right, so today our topic is mental toughness. And this is based on a blog post on Medium by Lorraine Kwai, who is a former counterintelligence FBI agent. So if you guys want to check this out on your own, we'll have a link to it in the blog, or you can Google it and find it that way too. But Lorraine's got some other pretty interesting articles out there too that you might want to check out. Richie and I were just looking at those. But today we're talking about her article entitled "Why Mental Toughness Gives You a Competitive Advantage." So give us a good overview of what we're going to be hitting here today, Richie.
All right. So, this really, it's a good title, right? And who better to write this than a retired FBI agent? But it's kind of interesting because the biggest barrier to a lot of things is you getting in your own way, right? And the mental aspect of things and the self-talk. So in this article, she definitely goes over 3 broad headings. The first one is goal setting. The second one is positive thinking. And the third one is imagery. And all that wraps up nicely into mental toughness for a competitive advantage. So we will just start at the top.
Yeah, fun little fact, too. One of my friends in the military said that whenever they're required to give presentations, they always have to break their talking points into groups of 3s. So she has these main 3 categories like Richie's talking about, and then inside of each one, she also has 3 tips that go along to support that main point that she's making. So wouldn't surprise me if the FBI had to do the same thing that, other military branches have to do, and I just thought that was kind of interesting.
I'm not positive, but I think that's a thing in law also. That you have something, then you have like 3 supporting points for it. And also, if you remember the 5-paragraph essay in school, if you were forced to partake in those, you did have those like 3 supporting paragraphs there.
That's a good point.
Remember those?
Yeah. The intro, the conclusion, and then the 3 supporting paragraphs. Glad I don't have to write many of those anymore. Double-spaced, size 24 font.
Well, first one, goal setting. I kind of like the way she describes this right in the front. Setting a goal is not only identifying something you want, but also something you are willing to persevere in order to achieve. I like that, right? Because a lot of times there are goals, there are things like, oh, that would be nice. And then when you look at what it takes to achieve that goal, it's more fight than maybe you really want to put into it. Right? Yeah. So a good goal is something that you want, but you also want enough that you're willing to fight to achieve it.
Yeah.
Because things will get tough if it's a worthwhile goal.
This is true. Goals is a very deep topic in and of itself, and we actually had another jam where we talked about SMART goals, and so we will definitely link to that in the blog post for this one. But in the SMART goals is kind of a method that helps you coming up with a goal that actually makes sense and that you can follow through on. And kind of later on here, something that's going to come into play a little bit is to make sure the goal that you're setting is actually attainable. Otherwise, things start to fall apart. But inside of the goal setting section here, she has 3 separate tips that will kind of help you through the goal creation and cultivating process. And so the first one that she gives is to set goals for the right reason. And this kind of gets you thinking about the why behind things. So the example she gives is winning the lottery, right? So that'd be a weird goal to make. My goal is to win the lottery and make $10 million. Why, right? Let's get to the root of that and why you want to win $10 million. Are you trying to purchase a new house? Are you trying to go on a vacation? What are you trying to do? Are you trying to put money into your business? Whatever it is, and kind of get to the why behind the goal that you've set for yourself.
Absolutely. Because once you start thinking about those things, then it's like, okay, I want to pay for my kids' college. Well, you don't need to win the lottery necessarily to do that. Having the right why is super important because it all comes back to, again, like if you pick something that's a goal that you're not willing to fight through when it gets challenging, then you're just not going to stick with that goal. So you need a powerful why. And I would also say that it's not a problem. There's no shame in trying a goal and then deciding later that you didn't have a very good why. That's okay too. Or circumstances change. You thought you wanted something more than you did, and then you want something else. That's perfectly fine. Right? I think as long as we keep having goals and keep striving for things, then that's a good thing. And I know there's like 1,000 books on goal setting, and there are so many different opinions of it. Some people want to set really easy goals that you can just kind of blow right through because they're encouraged by just kind of like crushing these goals continually. Some people like to set really big shoot for the moon goals. So even when you miss, you're happy because you made forward progress. And then there are some systems that incorporate all of those. And you have like a little itty bitty goal and a big goal. And then you have like your true target goal and, try to fool yourself. So don't get attached to any one system and just kind of, as you're going through these things, take the stuff that works well for you and that keeps you happy and keeps you motivated moving forward. Because most of all, that's what matters.
Totally. And like Richie's saying, there's a lot of stuff out there about setting goals. And if you want to dive into it, go ahead and dive into it. If you want to get into the SMART goal process that we've talked about before, go for it. I think the biggest thing, like Richie's saying, is do it. Just make a goal and see how it goes. And then keep making them and keep changing them and trying again over and over because you're going to find out what works best for you. Like Richie's saying, there's a bunch of different styles. So takeaway is just get in there and start doing it and then change what you're doing to keep doing more of what seems to be working for you. The second tip she gives is to set a direction. And we were kind of talking about this one before the jam a bit. And the way I think we're interpreting it is this is sort of a bigger picture than your goals. So once you have your goal and you know your why for why you're reaching for that goal, figure out what direction that's pointing you in, and make sure that the goals that you're setting are all agreeing with each other and with the direction that you have established. I think is what she's saying with this.
Right. And one of the things that's important, whenever you have your own business, whenever you have your own shop, your own endeavor, it is really hard to create like a work-life balance, right? Because life is work, work is life. Like there's a lot of, again, another topic where there's 1,000 books on it, but it all comes down to we all only have 24 hours in a day. And some portion of that we need sleep so that we can be, maintain being sane people. Well, sometimes we have a goal, but to get that goal is going to require a lot of extra time being thrown over into this other area. So it's almost like if you make a goal to do this, to focus on getting better returns in this area, you might have to have another goal that actually reduces time spent in other areas, ineffective areas, so that you can maintain that balance and, still achieve that overall result you're looking for.
Yeah.
Because overall, any sort of goal is a bigger picture. Right? It has to fit into a bigger picture. It has to fit into that whole why, right? You don't want to, if your goal for your Etsy shop is to leave your day job for your Etsy shop, then you don't want your Etsy shop to become something that was even more burdensome than the day job was, right? So it's all very much balanced.
Her third tip is to change the goal if it's not taking you in the right direction. And I think the core of this is really to be flexible. Be totally cool with changing your goals if you feel like you need to do so. Like Richie was saying earlier, one of the stumbling blocks that people have with goals is, they set too big of a goal or they set too little of a goal and they crush it too easily. And then they end up scrapping the whole thing because it didn't go the way they hoped it went. But the big thing is to be flexible with your goals. So if you set a goal and then you figure out a couple weeks into it, like, wow, this is way more huge than I thought it would be, it's totally fine to restructure that goal and carve it up into maybe some smaller pieces that are more manageable. Or if you set one that you just totally crush it inside of like a couple days, well, like that's fine. Keep that in mind. If you liked it and it felt good and you feel like you're making progress, keep making small goals. But if that was something that wasn't as satisfying as you hoped it would be when you completed the goal, for the next goal that you set for yourself, maybe make it a little bit larger of a goal so that it takes you a little bit longer to get there. But the whole point is to be flexible with your goal setting, and changing up the way you're doing things is okay.
As time goes by, life changes, the things you want change. If you have a family, everyone's getting older, things like you're changing, people are getting to different things. So if your vision starts changing, sometimes you move geographically, right? And your vision changes. So totally whatever is changing, make sure your goals adjust to that too. Everything is really just a balance with the goals, right? The goals need to support that overall thing. So don't be afraid of change, because overall goals are really, they're designed to make change. If you really want change, I feel like you need to be able to change your goal also. Otherwise it'd be silly. All right, second high-level area is positive thinking. So positive thinkers, she says, are blunt realists who look misery right in the eye and confront the most brutal facts of their day without expecting things to change. They adapt to their circumstances without ever losing hope. Now, this seems like an important characteristic for an ambitious goal, because at first, you could pretty much make any goal look pretty reasonable. But there will be some point in the journey of this goal where you will hit a low point and you'll have a bunch of different things that aren't working like you thought, which goes right into the first tip, which is to find 5 positive thoughts to counter each negative thought. Because once you hit that low point, you're absolutely going to find negative thoughts about why this isn't going to work. And that's where positive thinking comes into play.
Yeah, and I think this is something, too, that is, at least for me, it's a challenging thing. When you come up with some negative idea, to find 5 positive related thoughts that can counter that. It sounds easy to do, right? And in practice, it's probably going to be a little bit harder than you expect. But, you look at this, and for somebody like her in her background, this is probably something that she has definitely found to be true and helpful. And so I think that it carries just as much weight as anything else that she's mentioning in here, in that it would be valuable to do this exercise. If you're looking to beef up, your mental toughness, this is a perfect exercise that you can do to improve your own mental toughness.
And if it's hard to come up with 5, maybe, start with a lower goal. At least have double the positive thoughts of negative thoughts and do a 2-to-1 kind of thing and work up to 5. And if you can't think of 5 things that, so some ideas of that might be like, hey, 5 things that are working right now. I know there's some things that aren't working, but here are 5 things that are working, and those are bright spots. And if you can't think of 5 things that are working, think of the ones you can, and then think of 5 things you would like to be working, and just be positive about it.
Yeah, I like that. The 5 things that you would like to be working is a great place to start, especially for people who are really struggling to come up with something to put in the positive column. So the next tip that she offers inside of the positive thinking section is kind of another one of those mental exercises that you can use to beef up your own toughness, and that is to reflect on each positive thought for 20 seconds. And so this is basically forcing yourself to take some time and let that idea soak in. Just don't let it happen and kind of gloss over it and let it pass out of your mind, but really take the time that positive idea deserves and explore it for a good 20 seconds.
Yeah, because, you know how normally when negative circumstances creep in, we tend to dwell on them, right? It's like a very overwhelming, overpowering thought that just, whether or not you're eating breakfast, lunch, whatever you're doing, like you can't seem to get out of your head. And that happens without trying, right? So I feel like we really need to try to keep positive thoughts in the forefront and try to focus on them. So I really like that, putting think about these for 20 seconds. Actually keep that in there. Give it as much or more attention as we do the negative thoughts.
Yeah. And it's a really good point, too, that she makes earlier in the first tip. She says that the brain is naturally wired to pay more attention to negative rather than positive information because negative things alert us to emergencies and threats to our lives. Now, that doesn't necessarily translate exactly for things that we're facing every single day. Our lives aren't always in danger with everything. But she's explaining that that's why people tend to dwell on negative things, is because we as humans are kind of hardwired to do that. And you see that everywhere. You see that all over the place, whether it's the forums or Facebook groups or whatever. People, whenever there's a negativity feed that kind of goes on, it really starts to snowball and more people jump in there. She goes on into the second tip to say that negative thoughts are like Velcro. They stick because they kind of hang out. They hang around with you in your mind for a while. And that the positive thoughts really just kind of slide away. It's easy to have a positive thought and then boom, okay, next thing, right? I don't need to be concerned with that or think about it anymore. It was a good thing, but boom, let it goes by. And naturally, this is just what we do as humans. And so this exercise of taking 20 seconds and forcing yourself to focus on those positive things is going to help you build up that mental strength.
Which I feel like slides right into the third, which is imagery, right? So this is probably somewhat familiar to you because that's become a pretty popular notion as far as, imagining how you want things to be, visualize your success, just all that stuff, right? See yourself doing those things. So if you want to do public speaking, but you're afraid of that, visualize yourself on stage speaking confidently, that kind of thing, which helps you prepare for it and, kind of get some of that stress out in your mind ahead of time. So I think all these kind of really build up nicely to this whole imagery idea of it and visualizing.
We now interrupt your regularly scheduled broadcast to bring you the first Easter egg of May, which is a squirrel holding a purple umbrella. That's right, a squirrel holding a purple umbrella.
And her second tip underneath that section is to differentiate between being, visualizing something and fantasizing about something. And she doesn't get into a whole lot of detail here about, how she defines the difference between those two. Like Richie shared, he gave some examples of what you'd be doing to visualize, and she gives some other ones in the blog post too. But as best we can tell, when we looked up fantasy to really kind of dig into this and figure out what's at the meat of this here, fantasies are oftentimes around things that are impossible or improbable. And so we think this really ties back to the very first section we talked about of goal creation and making sure that the goals that you're setting are actually attainable. So if you're in the goal creation step and you pick a goal that, deep down isn't something that is very realistic or attainable, a goal that's impossible for you to hit, maybe when you create it, it sounds great. It's a goal that you want to reach, but in your gut, it's not really possible. When you're going through this activity of visualizing yourself having success with this, that would be more of a fantasy than the visualization process, because your body, your mind knows that the goal that you have is not realistic. It's an impossibility. And so any exercise you put forward into visualizing yourself reaching this goal, your mind knows that it's kind of false, and it's going to treat that more as a fantasy than this constructive visualization of attaining your goal.
Yes, and with that being said, it is about what you believe.
Yes.
Right? What you truly believe. It has nothing to do with what someone else thinks is attainable in general or for you or what your capabilities are. It is completely about what you believe. So if you believe something is attainable and you believe something is a goal worth imagining, worth fighting for, absolutely go do it. And it doesn't matter if no one else agrees with you. If you believe it, truly believe it, do it.
Yeah. I mean, people are different, right? You look at Olympic athletes and high school athletes. Their goals are going to be very different, and a goal that would be attainable for an Olympian isn't going to be attainable for a high school athlete. It's just kind of how things are. And so, like Richie's saying, they're definitely very, very individualized.
Yes, and that's a good example. So if you're an Olympic athlete, it would be it's improbable for just about anyone to become that, right? A lot of things have to line up, but it's even more improbable. You don't see anybody showing up to the Olympics that didn't train really hard, right? So the level of work and dedication and what they were willing to do to achieve those goals, right, all played into that too. But without believing that it's possible, even if no one else did, because there's a lot of stories about, well, just about anybody in any field, there's a lot of stories about people, like, no one believed in certain people, but they believed in it and they got there. If you believe in it, go for it.
Yeah. And then, so her last tip, the third tip underneath the imagery section, she says to move ahead with fearlessness. And what she's really talking about inside of this section is kind of amping up what we talked about in the first tip, which is to visualize your success. This amps up that step because not only are you visualizing success, but now you're going through this practice of visualizing obstacles that you're going to run into along the way. Things that you might think you're going to, hit up against. How do you handle those? Visualize those things ahead of time. Visualize yourself dealing with those things and overcoming those things. And it's going to prepare you not only for those things in case they do actually happen, but it's going to prepare you along the way to have a better sense of confidence that no matter what shows up, you've kind of already thought through things. You've visualized yourself past things, especially the things that you think are the most likely to happen. And you already have a good sense of confidence about how you're going to deal with any kind of obstacles.
Absolutely. What you can visualize and what you believe in is often the type of thing that, comes true, right? So, I mean, to talk about, athletics and sports, these professional athletes, when these top competitors, they get to the pinnacle of the competition, whether it be like championship or the Olympics or whatnot, kind of after the fact, sometimes the analysts will be like, it was their first time there. There was a lot of pressure. They didn't perform as well as they could have, et cetera, right? And I've heard, different competitors in interviews talk about that kind of thing too, especially if it's a sport where you're competing directly against somebody else, like in the moment. I heard one guy say that, like, he was up against his, what's the right word? Word for a guy, like, not hero necessarily, maybe hero, but, someone like you really look up to, and that's like the pinnacle, they're the best. So, like, all of a sudden, if you're competing against that person that you have always looked up to as the best, can you really visualize yourself winning? That's hard, right? Because, like, your whole life, this whole time, you've been looking up to them as doesn't get better than that. And so in this particular case, he did not win. He did not see visualizing winning, did not see it through, and, ultimately failed in that endeavor.
Pretty powerful.
Yeah. So, I mean, I guess that's the power of visualizing or not visualizing, for that matter.
So there you go. So yeah, check out this article if you want. The original one's pretty interesting. Like we mentioned, she goes into some other details in there too, which could be worth checking out if you're interested. It's called Why Mental Toughness Gives You a Competitive Advantage. Again, it's by Larae Quay, Laraequy. And that we found that on Medium. We'll link to it from the blog post. As always with Etsy Jams, we do have the audio version. We have a video version that goes out on YouTube. And then we have our blog posts, which Jade writes up. Thank you, Jade, for doing those. And you can find those on blog.marmalead.com/Etsy-jam. And they are all out there for your reading/viewing/listening pleasure. If you'd like to be a guest on Etsy Jam, if you like the topics that we're covering, if you have suggestions for other topics, please reach out to us at success@marmalead.com. We would love to hear from you guys. Other than that, we will catch you guys next time on Etsy Jam.